Okay, good afternoon everybody. You're all very welcome here to the fertility management stand. My name is David Kenny from Teagasc Grange in County Meath. I'm president of the BSCS, British Society of Animal Science, and I work closely here with Francis and other colleagues in Hillsborough, we'll say, on issues to do with reproductive management and also indeed more recently we'll say in mitigating greenhouse gases, which Francis will talk to you about in the next stand in more detail. So today or this afternoon we're going to very briefly go through some of the main aspects, we'll say, of management of a suckler herd, with particular emphasis on a spring calf and suckler herd. So I suppose like any business, the first thing you need to do is to outline, I suppose, what the key objectives are, the key targets, and then you need to have a way of measuring that. So if we look at some of the key performance indicators or KPIs for a spring calf and suckler herd, the first one is the 365-day calving interval or the 12-month calving interval, and this is an absolutely key one. If we look, we couldn't expect a cow really, we'll say, on average, to produce a calf, earlier than every 12 months or so. But certainly, once she goes beyond that, she's costing money. And in terms of barrenness then, we don't want, we'll say, any more than about maybe 1 in every 20 cows to be presented as barren, we'll say, or infertile. There'll be lots of reasons why we want to cull cows, but ideally, we'll say, involuntary reasons such as barrenness, we'll say, is not one of them. That 95% of the cows that calf, we'll say, will wean the calf. That's the role of the suckler cow, is to produce a calf and to wean that calf, a calf of good weight, we'll say, a weaning. And obviously that's going to be driven by issues like calving difficulty and hygiene. And herd health management plan obviously is a key one there to try to reduce, we'll say, the incidence of mortality or morbidity, we'll say, in your calf herd every year. Heifers calving at 2 years of age is a key one. For whether it's dairy cows or beef, or dairy herds or beef herds, it's a key metric. And we know from all the work that we've done ourselves and, all the work, we'll say, across Europe and indeed across the States, that those heifers that calve at 2 years of age are generally the most profitable, and they're generally the most, the animals that stay the longest in the herd when they're compared to contemporaries that calve at either 2.5 or 3 years, 2.5 years or 3 years of age. So again, it requires good management, obviously, we'll say, from essentially birth to ensure that those heifers are eligible for breeding at 14 to 15 months of age and that they can calf down, we'll say, then at 24 months of age. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in this presentation. Compact calving then, obviously a really important issue, we'll say, for, suckler herds and grass-based suckler herds, in that you want to try to, I suppose, shorten that period of calving, we'll say, as much as possible. Obviously there's a hardship element of it, we'll say, in terms of the longer it goes on. Equally, we'll say then, standards will slip, we'll say there, hygiene, we'll say, of calving facilities will decline. So the shorter that calving period is, the better. Equally then, for any of you producing weanlings, for example, the shorter the calving period, the more, I suppose, tight, we'll say, group of calves, we'll say, uniform group of calves that you have. And ideally, we'll say, about 80% of the cows will calve in about 6 weeks. So in other words, they can become pregnant in the first 2 cycles of the breeding season. And then a replacement rate of something between 60 and 18%. So again, obviously, you're going to replace some of the cows anyway, hopefully for voluntary reasons. We'll say either, that they're just not producing the quality of calf that you require or whatever it might be, and that you want to bring in a genetically superior heifer into the herd. So, but what you don't want is to have a high replacement rate because you have poor fertility. So ideally a cow, after putting in, a significant investment and effort into rearing a heifer or indeed purchasing a heifer, you want it to last as long as possible in the herd. And the target would be somewhere in the region of about 6, I suppose, calvings, 6 lactations. So then talk a little bit about maybe some of the management factors then that kind of help us to meet some of these KPIs. So if we start here with the cow calving, ideally the cows should calve in moderate condition. So if you take, you'll be all well aware of, have heard of the concept of body condition scoring. So this is just a technique essentially, we'll say, to assess the fat reserves of the cow at any one time. And it's generally scored on a scale of about 1, which would be a totally emaciated cow. Hopefully you won't see it in practice, versus a obese or overfat cow on a scale at 5. So you want a cow somewhere in the middle at calving. Okay, and we know that this has a major influence on the length of time it takes that cow to come back cycling again after calving, we'll say, which is the main, I suppose, issue, we'll say, with suckler cows compared to dairy cows. The length of time it takes them to start cycling again, we'll say, and which is obviously gives you the chance, or presents the chance to breed them, okay? Replacement heifers then bred at the start of the breeding season. So again, the only way you can do that is if they're cycling, we'll say, they've gone through puberty and they're eligible for breeding. And that requires them to be well grown for age, okay? And we know that, I suppose, weight for age, particularly around 8 or 9 months, has a major influence on when those heifers will start becoming sexually mature, will start having normal estrus or heat cycles, okay? And they're eligible for breeding. So it's important that you get a good weaning weight and that they're well managed, we'll say, then once they come off the cow, until they're housed, that you have, that they're well grown for age at that stage. And then that will allow you then, we'll say, to, I suppose, to grow them at about maybe 0.6 kilos a day, we'll say, and a veil of compensatory growth once they're turned out to grass afterwards. So that allows, obviously, to cut the costs during an expensive winter period. Time DI then, we'll say, if you want to use synchronization, AI particularly, will say, if you're to pick any cohort of animals in the herd, we'll say, or females in the herd for AI, it's the heifers. Generally speaking, the response, we'll say, to synchronization is good. Equally, we'll say, the pregnancy rates to either conventional or indeed sex semen is much better, we'll say, or better at least, than mature cows. Okay, and again, there's a role for AI in every herd, we'll say, but particularly the heifer cohort should be the ones that should be targeting particularly. Most of the calves born, we'll say, on the island of Ireland, and throughout the world are from natural service. So if you look at our own figures, it's 4 out of every 5 calves, we'll say, are born from natural service. So about 1 in every 5 is born sired from an AI bull. So again, the breeding soundness evaluation, or the breeding ability of the bull, we'll say, is really important. We need to conduct that, we'll say, get the bull tested essentially every year. Even bulls that were fertile last year, there's no guarantee they'll be fertile again. Any bull can go through a period of infertility or subfertility, maybe as a consequence of a subclinical disease or indeed clinical disease. Anything that raises the temperature of the scrotum or the testes can influence the developing sperm, we'll say, within the testes. And it takes about 2 to 3 months then for a new cohort of sperm, we'll say, to be, I suppose, available or to be mature to fertilise an egg or to I suppose, get a cow pregnant. So as I say, important, we'll say, every year to get your bull tested, we'll say, by a vet, well in advance, we'll say, of the breeding season. So you can do something about it if it crops up that he's a poor sperm count, for example. And equally, the vet can, examine the bull in much more detail in terms of his locomotion, we'll say, and, his general health. Whether it's cows or heifers you're dealing with, you should always focus on easier calving, okay? Again, reduce the hardship both on yourself and on the cow, and particularly with focus, we'll say, on heifers. And if you can use AI, on your heifers, that can again assist you, we'll say, by using high reliability bulls with good predicted transmitting abilities, or PTAs, we'll say, for calving ease. Define breeding season, whether it's spring calving, autumn calving, or summer calving. Try to, condense that calving period as much as possible. That's not going on, you're not calving cows for 6 or 7 months of the year, okay? Because again, there's a lot of hardship involved in that, obviously, for yourselves, but equally, we'll say, it puts pressure, in terms of keeping facilities clean and keeping standards up as well. And equally then, as I said already, a much more disparate group of calves, we'll say. And the pregnancy scan then, at the end of the year, very important, obviously, to pick up those cows that are not in calf, we'll say, so that you can, get those fed better, we'll say, for slaughter. Equally, a pregnancy scan, maybe after a month at the start of the breeding season, would be useful, particularly maybe where you have young bulls, and you want to make sure that those bulls are getting cows and heifers in calf, to the rate that you'd expect. So in other words, 2 out of every 3, we'll say, that are mated should be pregnant. So then just moving on, maybe a little bit more detail, with the replacement heifer, as I said, really important animal within the herd. It's really the basis of genetic, I suppose, gain. Heifers should be about 60-65% of their mature weight. So if you take, for example, maybe a first cross Friesian, we'll say Limousin, or maybe first cross Hereford Friesian, something in the region of 680, 700 kilo mature weight. Well, then the heifers that's replacing her should be somewhere in the region between 400 and 420 kilos, okay, at around 14 months of age. And that will ensure then, if you can get their heifers to that weight, it'll ensure that the vast majority of them are cycling, okay? So they'll be available to be bred in the first 3 weeks, the first 6 weeks of the breeding season. They'll calf down, and that'll give them a bit more time then to recover as first calfers, because we do know that it doesn't matter whether they calf at 2 years of age or 3 years of age, it'll take them a bit longer to resume cyclicity, to come back in normal heat cycles again as first calvers. So again, that'll allow them, we'll say then, to calf down, with the main herds the following year again as second calvers. Whereas if they calf at the end of the breeding season, or the calving season, I should say, well then, it's going to be they'll be under a lot of pressure, we'll say, to calf down again, we'll say, with the main herd the following year. Then, ideally, we'll say, as I said already, easy calving sires, use AI, particularly in those young heifers, because you have a lot more knowledge in what you're using, okay? You're taking out, we'll say, that element of surprise when you're using bulls with higher reliabilities. And again, you can get very good pregnancy rates, good synchronization rates if you're using synchronization in heifers. The stock bull, as I said, the fertility and health check, absolutely critical, no matter how long you have them. Hooves and mobility is assessed, because again, the semen test will only tell you, will say that he has good quality sperm, or he is fertile, or motile sperm, I should say. But it won't tell you, will say, if his hooves are not in good condition, if his mobility is impaired in any which way, which obviously will affect him being able to keep up with cows and mating cows, we'll say, for the duration maybe of a 12-week breeding season. Good condition, as I said already, the stock bull needs to be in better condition than the cows, really, because he's going to lose a lot of condition. He could lose up to 10% of his weight in the first 6 weeks of the breeding season. So if he's thin starting out, he's going to get emaciated, we'll say, into the middle of the breeding season, and that can have impact on his fertility. And monitor heats closely. As I say, don't assume that he's fertile. Just watch out for an excessively high level of repeats, okay? So then, just to, I suppose, finish up then, reproductive efficiency is absolutely key. Any of the figures that we do in terms of looking at profitability, or environmental sustainability that Francis will talk about, fertility and reproductive management, overall reproductive efficiency is a key driver of both of those, okay? Because again, if you have infertile animals, we'll say, or you're keeping heifers longer than you should do before you bull them, get them pregnant, well then they're producing greenhouse gases, they're costing you money. Duration of the postpartum period, the interval or the time period between when the cow calves and when she's eligible for breeding is a key issue for the suckler cow, And again, get calving her down in good condition, or moderate to good condition, can shorten that down substantially by 2 to 3 weeks compared to a cow calving down thin. Heat detection, where AI is used, again, it doesn't suit a lot of herds, we'll say, but if you are going to use it, you need to be prepared to put in the time and effort, we'll say, to monitor those cows regularly for heats, and/or use some, electronic technology, we'll say, to help you with heat detection. And finally then, as I say, bull fertility, don't assume whether it's a young bull and you've after buying him at a sale and he's a cert there to say, he's very fertile and he's great semen quality. That doesn't tell you whether his libido, in other words, his motivation to mate a cow, is sufficient, whether he's, we'll say, physically able to mate a cow. Make sure that's where you have to come in and make sure that he's doing what he's supposed to do. So with that, I leave it, and I'm very happy to take any questions or criticisms or whatever you might have. And thanks for your attention.